Welcome to the Uniformed Reality VidCast.
And wanted to welcome everyone to a special edition to the broadcast. Couldn't come at a better time, more timely given the circumstances that are rapidly developing now in Minneapolis, just a flat out powder keg in Minneapolis as we speak. For those of us who aren't caught up, this was prompted by the death of a 46-year-old African-American man, George Floyd, following an arrest or an attempted arrest in Minneapolis not too long ago, taken to the hospital following that arrest and died a short time later. A video emerges of that arrest of a Minneapolis police officer who was shown with his knee firmly planted on the neck of Mr. Floyd on the sidewalk in handcuffs. Doesn't appear as though there was any kind of resistance whatsoever. And needless to say, it is on in Minneapolis and across the nation right now. A lot of spirited developments going on across the country following the death of Mr. Floyd. We're going to unpack that and a lot more today on the broadcast. We're going to go deeper, broader, talk not just about that case in Minneapolis, but police community relations, especially around the African American community, accountability, trust, expectations of community. And we have got one hell of a panel to unpack all that, starting with Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Chief Kerr Putney, 30 years, nearly 30 years in the biz, fair to say, managed his share of high-profile incidents in Charlotte-Mecklenburg. To his right, Kass Ottley on the front lines of community activism for years, a firebrand, an ardent, vocal critic of police misconduct, her perception of law enforcement and the way that they unjustly, inconsistently, disproportionately police the African American community. And last but certainly not least, Greg Jackson started up an organization several years back called Heal Charlotte, a community organization that he started up following an officer-involved shooting in 2016 here in Charlotte of Keith Lamont Scott, which developed into several days of demonstrations here in Charlotte, North Carolina. So that's where we are. Wanted to start it off with the Chief of Police. I know, Chief, a lot of your contemporaries across the country, around the world, other police chiefs, have been very vocal, come out publicly and have condemned what they saw in that video. I know you've had ample time to look at that video. Your thoughts?
I was hoping not to go first. I got a lot of thoughts, but yes, it's all the major cities chiefs, they're probably going to put out a statement later today condemning this. It's disgusting, it's cowardly, and there is no justification. We keep doing all this work, and yet the behavior of one person basically going rogue puts us all in jeopardy. It made our jobs in this profession a lot harder. It's ridiculous, it's disgusting, it's frustrating, and we're getting tired of it. It's a slap in the face, and it's an affront to all the good officers who are doing some fantastic work. This overshadows that. This sets us back decades. So I'm not very pleased about it.
Kass, some in the profession say that this is a one-off, this is an anomaly. You think that there's more of a systemic thing at play here than just the George Floyd incident. It goes far beyond that.
I mean, we're looking at several different cases. We're looking at Breonna Taylor, right before that. A no-knock warrant for someone that was already in custody, and this woman was killed. And we have a history of policing in the black community ending with violence. And so when police come into the black community, they come into the black community differently than they do into the white community. And that's a problem.
Yeah, and a problem that you've been addressing, and
yes. And how many times can you address the same issue and see nothing change? We've been at this for years. We've talked to city council, county commissioners, we've been to police meetings, we've been to all these different meetings, we've come up with all types of different ideas, and it's almost like people see me, but I'm like, do you really hear me? Are you really listening to what the community is saying, what the community is asking for? Because we've been asking pretty consistently for the same thing for years.
And that's what exactly?
Just first of all, for police to respect our community, to understand our community, to come in with some level of respect and not come in with their guns blazing, screaming and hollering and having disregard for children and everything else that's going on. We recognize that the officers want to be safe. We get that. But in a lot of these cases, I've been in several situations where the officers right off the cuff get out the car cursing, screaming, and hollering, which escalates the situation. A lot of times it might be okay just to have a conversation, or maybe have a person in the community that you could go to speak to, you know, to help you with your relationship in that community. And I feel like, you know, no transparency. A lot of these police shootings, we don't know what happened. You know, we either see it on video or we see what happened. We see a black person get gunned down. There's some quiet investigation. You know, it might go to, you know, you don't know what happened. And I think that's a huge part of the problem, that there's no transparency.
Before we bring Greg into the mix, a lot to unpack there, Chief.
Yes.
Your thoughts?
I'll start with the transparency. Sometimes you got to be careful what you ask for. I mean, we used to be able to talk through some of the things that we're finding in the course of investigation. We don't have those investigations here locally anymore.
Sure.
That's moved to the state level. And I think too, though, when you talk about trust and transparency, you got to look at it from the historical lens. And again, my frustration is, I believe we're doing a lot of work trying to make some progress. We've engaged a lot of people as we rewrote our whole policy around how we use force. We've been trying to be very open with what we're trying to do to improve, and you have something like this and it gets you right back to where we were at the very beginning, and it doesn't help the trust, it actually hinders it, and you're starting from scratch every time. So I get the frustration, I share it. When you come into this line of work and you want to be inside to change things, and you have people who do things that I think are totally counter to everything you're trying to do, it's hard not to be frustrated, and it's tiring, but it's a fight worth fighting. Just because people feel like they want more doesn't mean I'm going to give up. None of us are, those who are true professionals. But we got to have some accountability too. I think that's the big piece is we talk about transparency, but accountability. People want to see something happen.
Sure.
Even in this case, they were fired early, but we want to go back to why were we there in the first place?
Sure.
And that's our issue. We talk about recruiting and training. Anyway, I don't want to go too far, but the frustration is everything you do can be decimated in an instant, in one day, and it's getting old.
Yeah, and you know, now you have the profession painted with one broad brush, and that, you know,
All of us are painted with a broad brush, and it's you know, it's frustrating.
You know, Greg, you know, you and I were having off the record conversations. You have little girls, and you had on cable news last night, and you know, we're watching it all develop right there in our living rooms. You've had some conversations with your daughters about this. What were some of the things you talked about with your girls?
Just having a talk to her, which was frustrating, about the history of America, the history of police force in the black community, and the things that people have to face nowadays, and things that she might have to face. I mean, she's 9 years old watching buildings burn, you know, and even talking to my mom, I told her, do you think it's fair that I have to have a conversation with my daughter that you had with me, that my grandmother had with you, that my great-grandmother had with my grandmother, that my great-great-grandmother, like it goes all the way down the line, that we have to continuously have this conversation over and over and over again. And it's, and you know, I agree with Chief. It's frustrating. It was disgusting. That was a public lynching. That's what that was. That was a call out to other white supremacists that feel just like him to make a move. And I think like even this conversation is so important, because we're talking to the opposition right now. And then we're also letting other people know that do this good work, that fight's not over and not to stop. When society takes 2 steps backwards, we can't as a people take the steps backwards with them. We have to continue to move forward. So I was just telling my daughter that, and it was frustrating that I had to have that conversation with her. But she sees what I do, she sees the impact of what I do, and I'm pretty sure that she's gonna understand that it's a point in fighting. And I'm with Chief on accountability. This is about accountability. This is that officer has 18 complaints in internal affairs, 18. And 2 of them led to any discipline, only 2. And and that's about us knowing the system too. And that's about us knowing who to complain to and how to complain. And that's why I do the work that I do. That's why I do know the officers. That's why I do know Chief. That's why I do know the lieutenants, you yourself, because I want to be able to be in a position where my voice has power in my neighborhood.
right?
You know, Kass, you talked about accountability, and all three of you actually have talked about accountability. You talked about those, Greg, those 18 complaints lodged against that officer. Is that where some of the frustration creeps in when you see something, a track record like this, 18 complaints, and here this guy is right back out into the community?
Yeah, it
Can you
looks
talk
like that
through?
behavior is being condoned. You know, if I do something wrong and you're my boss or you're my superior or you're someone that has some influence over me and you constantly see me out here doing things that are wrong and you don't step to me and say something, then you're co-signing what I'm doing because you're not speaking up against it. Now, they fired those 4 officers, but what they should have done is fired them and then charged them. Then I don't think that the whole city would be burning down right now because it's a playbook. We've seen this play out so many times. You know, we see someone get killed. They try to criminalize the victim. You know, if they do fire the person or do something minimal, it's to appease everybody. And then if it even makes it to where they're charged and they go to court, most of them don't even get that far and they don't get any jail time.
Sure.
So what are you saying in the totality is that this is okay. This behavior is okay. We're going to give you a slap on the wrist because if I put my knee on someone's neck outside and everybody saw it and the person died, I'd be in jail quick. There would be no, we need to look at the tape further and, you know, he might have had a medical condition and, you know, you don't know what happened before that. We watched this officer with his knee on this man's throat for 8 minutes. There are so many points and times where he could have taken his knee off this man's throat. I mean, you had community asking, you had this man calling for his mother who had died 2 years. I mean, it broke my heart.
It is heartbreaking. Great characterization. Heartbreaking. I think we'd all agree there.
I mean, and I'm sitting there looking at my TV like this can't really be happening. And then you have the other officers just standing there. So we talk about the good officers. I'm gonna need them to step up. Because if you're a good officer and you see someone doing something wrong, I'm gonna pull your coat. We might be friends, but I'm gonna say, hey, come here, you are wrong. You know, you need to get it together. I know what you're going through, but you know, you can't do this. You can't just stand there. So they're all, you know, condoning this behavior. And for him to have his hand in his pocket, he looked calm, cool, and collected while he squeezed the life out of this man.
Yeah.
No concern, no type of, I'm upset, nothing. Horrible,
Yeah,
despicable.
You can't think that this is unique to people like Kass. You know, there's probably a lot of people who feel the same way on the accountability end, and you have others that, you know, standing by.
Yeah, you're looking at one. I mean, truly. And I think, too, what I hear is some of this is about the culture. Some of it's about what people can't really see inside. And what we tried to do, what we do here is we were one of 6 pilot agencies that wanted to look at that history, that track record, you know, your offenses, your use of forces, your complaints, all of that in a big data so we can see, and we rank those people who score high on misbehavior. And we really make sure we've fired quite a few of them because we don't want that to become entrenched. But again, it's deeper than that when you talk about trust because all of that work seems to be thrown out the window when you have something this egregious because it takes you back to a time of Jim Crow and before where it was legal to do those kinds of things. So I understand too the need for having that arrest. I wish there was something I could do and, you know, wave a wand and make it happen sooner. But the issue that we have sometimes is the officer who's in a union has more protection than the general public. I get that too. So there are a lot of other nuances that add to the frustration and the misinformation and the lack of understanding, thus a lack of trust. So you got to chip away. I've been at this inside for quite a while, and it's frustrating because you can think you're making progress, and then this puts you back similarly or feeling like you're back at square one.
You know, you came into the business. You talked about being in the business for a while, nearly 3 decades. You were a little apprehensive and suspicious of the business before you even got into it.
I just didn't like cops. I mean, I wasn't apprehensive. I came in here because I thought I was going to see what I've been feeling, what I'm hearing about, and I wanted to deal with it head on.
Why didn't you like cops?
Well, I had plenty of reasons not to like cops. I saw what was done to my family in particular and some of my friends. I didn't like the way they treated people in my neighborhood when I grew up. I didn't like the way they talked to people. And if my dad dies and you don't investigate it, I have no use for you, period.
Driven by race in your...
I don't have a doubt. That's exactly what I attribute a lot of that to, is race, especially at that time. I couldn't see anything else. none of the other quote unquote factors and variables would explain away what we were seeing.
Well, let's touch the elephant in the room, race. You know, Greg, you talked about it with your daughter and some of your family members. Any doubt in your mind that these actions were driven by race, those officers?
Not a single doubt in my mind. That officer, I seen a demon in his eyes. I seen the same look that I seen when I look at people getting hung from the KKK. I seen the same look. That's the same look that has existed in this country since slavery. And that look hasn't changed in those people's eyes. And to see how cool, calm, and collective he was with his hands in his pocket and looking at the camera, I knew he was sending a message to people that thought just like him, to entice people to do the same thing. And I know that was a hate crime, that was bigotry, that was racism, and that was him trying to wipe out one of us purposely.
Feel any differently, Kass?
No, I agree 100%. I definitely agree. I mean, just the look on his face and just his body language. You know, his body language, he was too calm, cool, and collected. You know, and what upsets me is if that was a black man that did that to a white man, we would be having this conversation because he would have been fired and he would have been arrested. There's no doubt in my mind, cop or not. Because, you know, you had the Muslims, the officer that was from Somalia, I believe, that shot the white woman. And guess what happened? He went to jail and he got 12 and a half years. So, you know, you have to look at the black and white of it, you know, because it's in your face. You know, even if right now when you look at, and I call it weaponized whiteness, when you have these people who are calling the police on black people for all types of things.
I like that.
The man asked her to put her dog on a leash.
And she's referencing the Central Park
Right,
incident that
in
happened not too
Central
long
Park,
ago.
Amy Cooper. And she calls the police saying that she is being threatened and attacked by what? Those cops could have came and killed that man. And the only reason why she apologized is because her investment banker company that she works for now got rid of her. They even made her give her dog back. But I think what upset me even more about that is people were more upset on social media about the condition of the dog. Oh, she was choking the dog. I get that, but this black man could have lost his life.
Right. Shows
you
what
know,
our priorities are as a society. Sure.
Right, and we've had so many of these. Kids selling water, someone going to the pool, golfing while black, sleeping at your dorm. I mean, where does it end? And so, you know, we have this message being sent out to people, law enforcement and white supremacists and racists, that they can utilize this power to not only oppress, control, and sometimes kill people of color. This is a problem.
Chief.
Well, you know, we're talking about parsing out specific variables in race, and it's almost like we want to have a snapshot of one incident, and that's what I keep telling you can't do that. I mean, everything you do is through various perspectives, and I told you mine. It took me a while to believe that, you know, this was not the most racist profession. I mean, I felt that way coming into it, and when I start working with some of the best people that I'd met who happened to be white, it gave me a broader perspective. But again, what I have to do when I look at this is look at it through a lot of lenses. And you know, you don't, and again, this is why I preach to people, use that smartphone, capture it, give us evidence, because I want to hold that accountability. And you know, you separate race out. Anytime somebody's mistreated, we need to address it and hold accountability. But especially when you see groups that have historically been in that position, it's even more of a need to have accountability, because that's the trust that's so hard to get and so easy to lose. So we got a lot of work to do, and not talking about race or trying to separate everything from race is not going to get us where we need to be.
You come into the profession under the assumption that this is a racist profession. Now that you've been in the profession for nearly 3 decades, what are your impressions about the profession now? Is it driven by race?
Well, the whole profession, absolutely not. I do think, though, we do have some people who have race issues, who are individuals within this profession. You can't separate it out. We're not any different than anybody else. Everybody falls back on how we recruit and how we train, but what we're trying to do is better educate. You know, we talk about the study where we show, you know, how you are quick to basically vilify black people based on what you see, doing the same action. What we don't talk about is the way to overcome that is to connect with people, especially black people and Latinos, consistently to change that perspective. We're trying to do some of that work, which is going to take a while. I mean, we didn't get here yesterday. We didn't get here in the last 30 years. But the problem is it's getting frustrating because it's taken so long for us to work through it.
On the recruitment side of things, so that there's no doubt in your mind that in the profession, maybe even here locally, we've got people with some racist cops that are in the profession, and maybe even here locally. How hard is that to detect and pick up on during background checks? How would you even decipher whether somebody's got those kind of toxic feelings in their heart?
Right. What I tell you, we got a lot of behavioral issue interviews that we do, and we look at your track record. We have denied people or told them you have to come back when you show us proof that you've been working in a diverse community. We have a lot of people who come here who have been in basically a monolithic town where it's just one race basically, and it gives us some concern. We tell them come here, do some things locally, get involved and see how diverse we are as a city, and then you want to serve in that city. But I wish there were a pill you could take that would give you pristine, perfect people. They don't exist. And we keep talking about racism in the PD. Racism is everywhere. I mean, you have racists everywhere. And I don't know how pervasive it is. It's not my job to really concern myself with it. I got to hold accountability to the behavior and look for indicators that we need to address.
Well, and I don't think anyone would disagree that regardless of the profession, you're going to find racists in that profession. I guess where critics would come in and say, but this is the kind of profession that those racists could take someone's freedom away and possibly, potentially, take their lives away. So there is a difference here.
I don't disagree. You're preaching to the choir. What I tell you is that's why I challenge all departments to do some of the work in trying to get the intrinsic study of a person, right? Knowing deeply what they're about, more so than if you got good credit, how do you express yourself in writing and communication, those generic and I think surface level things, get deeper into who that person is and what they're really about. So you can tap into and look at their history. And so you can tap into those people who genuinely want to do the right thing for all people. That's what we're seeking to do. It's not easy and obviously it's not perfect.
You talked about that response to resistance policy that was updated, and that didn't happen in a vacuum. It was the former use of force policy for the department. That didn't happen in a vacuum, right? It was put together through a lot of community input. Sure. How important is it that the community weighs in on how they want to be policed?
It's critically essential, but again, people think that you get the policy right and you're covered, and it's not that simple. I mean, the law is the law. And there are nuances to it around, do you feel your life is in an imminent lethal threat right now?
And that's in the eye of the beholder.
It is. So we do a lot of training, we do conversations, we're talking about the education around differences in race and culture. We're trying to expose them to a lot of things so that when they fall back to that legal standard, they have the full context of everything with that, and they're making their decision based on truly and as objectively as we can make it humanly, whether or not that life is in jeopardy. It's not based on a factor that they intuitively almost look at when they think about violence, which could be a black person or something else. We're trying to get to the core safety and survival mode, which is hard to overcome everything else that comes with it. So we're doing a lot of training to get you comfortable with people who are different than you, so that decision isn't based on anything like that, as best as we humanly can.
Kass, you're the queen today. You get to lay down the scepter and, things that, actionable and reasonable that you think recognize should require some attention. If you can make some changes, they would be what specifically?
That's a big question. I think, first of all, when we talk about fearing for your life, that's different for everybody.
Sure.
Now, we could be in this room right now and something can happen and I could be scared to death and everybody else could be perfectly fine. So I think that maybe needs to be narrowed down a little bit more, like reasonable, because you have some of these officers that are afraid of all types of things. We've had people being shot with wallets, cell phone, all types of things. And I think that's a problem. But I think, like you're talking about some of these policies being changed and the community input, but I think the community at large has no idea.
Sure.
So maybe there should be some type of campaign to get this information out to the broader community. you know. And when we talk about making, well, I won't say making these officers, but kind of immersing these officers into community, a lot of these officers might not want to do that. You know, that maybe that's not what they want to do. And by making them do that, that might not be helping the situation either.
Well, maybe this isn't the profession for them.
Right,
then.
right. You know what I'm saying? Because
That's the whole point about it is if you
Right.
don't have people who genuinely want to do
right,
it,
right.
they might not deserve the opportunity to do
You
this
know,
work. I'm sorry,
because,
go ahead.
you know, you're fine. It's just, you know, I see police officers and I see them doing great work with children in the community and, you know, taking the kids out and, you know, doing all this great work with kids. But in my mind, I think when that little boy becomes a grown man, are they still going to embrace him in the same way?
Yeah.
Or are they going to see this big black man as a threat and gun him down? And that's what I'm concerned about, you know, and that's why, I have a lot of reservation in dealing with a lot of things. I mean, we had a whole conversation. I've had a lot of negative experiences growing up in New York with the police, seeing them in my neighborhood, seeing certain things, you know, go on. And that's hard to put aside, especially when you keep seeing the same behavior, not just here in Charlotte, across the country.
Yeah.
You know, so it is a problem with policing, and it's also a problem with the laws. You know, this country was built on racism. I'm just going to speak facts. So a lot of these laws are built to oppress people. So we can't get around that. So there's a lot of things that need to change for us to move forward. But I think everybody needs to be honest about what the real problems are. You know, we keep tiptoeing around it, and you know, we touch the surface a little bit. We really need to really dig deep and really talk about the racism and the systematic, you know, and really dig down deep so we can actually change, because we got to get honest before we can change things.
Speaking of honesty, you know, Greg, you were right on the front lines in 2016 during the demonstrations of,
Yeah.
you know, Keith Lamont Scott, when you really emerged onto the radar.
Mm-hmm.
What prompted you, and you know, how much in lockstep are you with Kass, you know, when we're talking about tiptoeing around the issue instead of taking it head on?
Absolutely. I mean, she's absolutely right. 2016, honestly, it was about Keith Lamont Scott, but it wasn't just about Keith Lamont Scott. There were murders all over the country from 2015 to 2016 of unarmed black men by a white officer. And that, us ignoring it like it couldn't have happened here is what made it such of a big thing for me personally, because I think even I had these blinders on, like it's not gonna happen here. And it happened here, and my level of tolerance, it just went through the roof. So now I'm very zero tolerance about that happening again. And that won't be accepted, and it's not wanted. But I also hold myself accountable in my own neighborhood. And like I was listening to Bobby Seale on the way over here, and listening to his speech, he was saying the same exact thing that I had in my head. And I thought that was an injustice to him. That was an injustice to anybody that died for me to have the privileges and the rights that I have right now, that I continuously have to talk about this. So right now in this moment, yes, I want the training to continue. That has been happening because we had great strides with these new trainings that was happening inside the police department, where it was helping superiors that I was working with identify certain characteristics in an officer that he probably shouldn't have. It was helping officers identify what accountability is. If your partner is having a bad day, should he really take the lead? Things of that nature. Those things were brought to the forefront in these type of trainings that I was involved in. So yes, I want to see those trainings continue. But then I also want to see us mobilize as black people. I want to see us be able to come unify with one voice, with an agenda that we want to accomplish as one. And that's so important in our neighborhood. And I don't want to use the term neighborhood watch, but sometimes in your neighborhood you have to police the police.
Yep, police
And
watch.
you have to be on point about what's going on in your neighborhood, and that's something that I take a lot of pride in, and having officers that I do know, and being able to not just dial 911, but to dial somebody's cell phone. You know, that social capital, that cachet, it means a lot. And sometimes I think back to some of these things. If it was somebody around that had that cachet, would it be the same situation? It might still be the same situation, but it would also be a different message that was put on that phone that was filming that man die, you would see a unified front happening in that moment as that man has his knee to his neck. The fear that's in the black community, I just want to obliterate it. We can't be scared to step up and move and mobilize as a unit.
Now, there's a difference between, I'm sorry, Chief.
Let me just say this, though. I mean, and hopefully we'll get there, because I've been having these conversations for quite a while, and talk is great. But what I'm talking about is, what does success look like? And we're saying policing the police. To me, all that is community policing, because you know who these people are, who are policing you, and you explain to them the way in which you want to be policed.
Yeah.
Hard to do in a bigger city, hard to do in a, I'm just saying, it's not easy.
But I think we've been doing that, and no one is listening.
Well, we've been trying, but you have. And here's the other thing, Kass. I know the work you're doing in helping people who are hurting. You're doing that right now. I appreciate you taking the time. I know you're working with a family now. I know these things with people who are doing right, and I give them credit. But we talk about changing laws, and I came in here thinking I'm gonna change everything.
Yeah.
And now I know I can deal with policies, but it takes time to really, I can change all the policies and laws in the world if I were king, but who's gonna abide by them when you're not looking?
Yeah.
That's where we're trying to go. So the way to do that is, you have somebody you can call, know the first name, and say, hey man, this ain't right, right? And then you know that you're gonna hold that person accountable. The issue is scaling that up to a point where
It's
we
systematic.
finally know
Right.
we have a voice inside who can hold the people accountable to the level you expect them to.
Absolutely.
It doesn't have to be everybody. We're not going to stamp out racism in America
No.
in my lifetime.
No.
But what we can do is fight it with everything we have on a unified front.
Yeah.
And that's how we do it. And I don't need, I thought I had to change the minds and hearts of everybody who came through the academy. I don't have to touch the select few who are going to do that work with their peers better than I ever could.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I've changed my perspective on what we're trying to do and what we're trying to get as an outcome.
It's systematic change that needs to happen. And sometimes, like, even in the community, I'm not gonna change the mind of every person that's in my neighborhood of how they feel, but I can change the culture of my community. And that's what I believe Chief has been doing as a chief, is trying to change the culture of the police department in Charlotte. And but it's systematic change that we have to talk to. Fixing people isn't gonna change the problem.
Yeah, but Greg, you know, you being as community driven as you are, you threw the word accountability out there, and if you would argue that you do take ownership, you do have accountability, the responsibility. It's got to break your heart, situation aside, and what prompted it, to see community members burning a community down like this. That's, you know, that's the antithesis of responsible. You know, look at us in 2016. You know, and we get that pent up anger, and you know, they want to have a voice. You had a guy, you know, Justin Carr, a young kid, just out there demonstrating who lost his life and all that. I wouldn't call that responsible. Call that reckless, violent.
And it goes both ways. I think that you know what I disagree on with Greg is, it is about people though. It's about the personal responsibility on all fronts. It's about having that person that you can call directly to hold other people accountable. And I think we talk about systemic change, but if you take the people out of it, what is a system really? We're a system of people. That's what makes up our organization.
Yeah.
So when you start changing the individual people, you do change the system.
Yeah.
It just gets frustrating because it takes so long, and things like what's going on right now continue to set us back. I'm sorry, Kass, I thought you had a comment.
And I had a question for Kass, though. I'm going to shift a little bit because we're getting close. Sure. Just FYI, I mean, the elephant in the room, she was kind enough, gracious enough to break away from work today to make this happen, and that's not lost on us. We
I hope that's okay to share. I mean,
right.
It's okay.
No, but that's how devoted she is to this issue, and she just jumped at the opportunity and rearranged her whole schedule. It's eternally grateful for that. Kass, what about, you know, you're very active on the activism side, and you know, demonstrations. When you see things unfold like they've unfolded in Charlotte in 2016, you know, millions of dollars in damage, a life lost, you know, a young man who was demonstrating, what's developing out there in Minneapolis right now, a precinct that was set ablaze, 100 some odd businesses that were looted. From an activist's standpoint, how does that land with you?
I get it. I understand it. You know, they say that a riot is the language of the unheard. And I feel like people are frustrated. When Charlotte Uprising happened here in Charlotte, you know, it was on the heels of the Jonathan Ferrell case, right? Yeah. So we saw what happened to Jonathan. You know, the officer got arrested, and we really thought the system was going to work. And so we sat there every day during that trial, and we saw them criminalize the victim. He all of a sudden became a suspect, suspect of what? And we watched the mistrial, and no one was held accountable. They wrote a check to his mother, and they act like, that was justice. And so you keep seeing these things, and after a while, there's a boiling point. Of course, no one wanted Justin Carr to lose his life. There's still back and forth about what happened and, who did what and the particulars on that. But my thing is, you can't control, first of all, when you have a demonstration, you can't control everybody.
No.
You're going to have people that are going to show up and they want to be peaceful. You're going to have people that want to show up that want to burn the city down. You're going to have people that were paid to show up. You're going to have people from out of town that show up. So there's a lot of variables going on.
Do you condemn the variables that lead to violence and the destruction of business and property?
Do I condemn them? No.
You don't condemn them.
I'm not gonna sit here and condemn them. Do I agree with everything that's going on? No, but I get it.
But how can you? I mean, and I love you to death, New York girl and everything else like that. And this is,
But I get why people are upset, and I get why they're lashing out, and they're burning down their city. I mean, I can't tell people to that don't feel that way or don't do that. You know how many riots we've had? We could talk about the riots that we've had when particular baseball games have been won, and they burn up cars and burn up the city. We've had riots when certain hockey teams have lost. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Well, we don't spotlight that, and we don't talk about that because it's a different demographic that's burning the city up, and it's a different reason. My team didn't win. Let's turn over some cop cars, and there's plenty of video. But when a black community is upset and have had it with a history of their people being killed on video, off video, the only thing that's different now is that these killings are on video. There's nothing that's really changed.
Some would argue, it's a little hypocritical. You're condemning violence when it's, police violence and brutality and misconduct. But then if there's violence that it develops during,
we're looking at property. So, we're talking property over people.
There you go.
There's a huge difference.
Huge difference.
Huge
difference.
Greg,
and my thing is, and I hate to say it, but a lot of these companies and these businesses and the black community do absolutely nothing for the black community except drain their resources and take them back to their community. So do I condone the violence? No, but I definitely get it. And I get that man, George Floyd's life, was worth more than all of that property to me. That was a life.
But is this really honoring his life when you see things develop like they're developing in Minneapolis?
My thing is this, we always get into, well, we're honoring him, or that's only a conversation when it comes to us. And I find that to be, I don't know the man, and I don't know how he would feel about it. Me personally, I don't know whether it is or not, but people are tired, they want to change, and they're tired of waiting. It's the wait, be patient, turn the other cheek, wait. You know how long we've been waiting?
And that's what it's about. It's like,
People
yes,
have
it's
it.
to honor George Floyd, right? Rest in peace to him and God bless him. But just like I said
and
about
his
the
family.
Keith and his family, but just like I said about the Keith Lamont Scott protests, it started off about Keith. But if you think about it, those were lined up murders that we were marching for. That was years and years of being counted out and disenfranchised and have injustices and no equality. That was years and years of that leading up to that. So when people are looking at this protest and people are looking at the riot, you have to remember that they're not mad over one situation.
Right. It's a history.
There was
of
a protest in
situations.
2016 in Minneapolis. That this isn't the first time they protested. So there's an anger there that if you're not black in America, you don't really understand the anger, And do I want people burning down the city? Do I want that happen? Of course not. Right. But do I want people to sit still and not do anything? I don't want that either. So I don't condone it, but I can't condemn them at the same time.
Chief,
What?
your thoughts. I guess
I condemn anybody who's going to burn up and commit violence. And we're saying property over people, but Justin Carr was a person. And I'm just saying
we're not
sometimes
talking about him.
Well, I am.
Definitely,
We're talking broadly. And also, I would love to have more time because we're talking about murders. And a justified shooting is not a murder. I just think we need to, we have to parse out exactly what we're talking about and exactly what context, because, again, throwing a broad brush over anything, I think lessens what we're trying, lessens the opportunity for success in what we're trying to achieve. And here's, I'll go back to the situation in Minneapolis. What's troubling though is now all the focus is it's almost a prophecy that within itself continues to manifest, because what we're seeing is they can quickly say, look at that, look at them, here we go again, overreaction, blah, 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 overly emotional, when truthfully, this could be the rallying cry to how we can continue to reform and get better, because there's nobody that I've heard of who can justify or rationalize the actions.
What do you
All
say,
we're
Chief?
focusing on, though, is what's happened after.
Yeah.
And how, look at him turning up, look at that, instead of saying, this is the catalyst to do something right, to find out and hold some people accountable,
Yeah.
to know them by name,
Yeah.
to call them out,
Yeah.
right? To truly try to fix the system. Instead, we're right back to where we were, and it's all about race again, and it's all about look at them, and it's all about labels, and it's not about addressing the core issues that really, if we don't get right, we're going to continue to be here, and it will be a process that continues to.
And let me fix like, I would not be out there personally burning down anything. When 2016, I peacefully protested. I came directly to the police department, and I understood how to educate, eloquently
called out
speak,
everybody
and
you saw.
called out everybody I saw. And that was my goal. So I wouldn't be out there doing that. That wouldn't be my way of approaching this situation and how to make change and make an impact that can last longer than that one moment. And that's what I'm about.
And I passed you during the protests on the police
Yes.
steps.
Yes, yes.
Peacefully protesting, and got tear gassed.
Yeah.
And a whole bunch of other stuff went on. You know, had to carry a reporter under a overpass because the man almost passed out. Some gentleman I didn't even know. So yeah, that was a hot mess. Let me just say that.
No doubt. No doubt.
With this situation, you know, talk about calling people out. We know who the officers are.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? Everybody knows their names. There was a call for them to be arrested. It's 4 days later. They have not been arrested. From what I understand, the FBI, there was some talk about, they don't have enough evidence to charge anyone. What more do you need? So at this point, yes, people are tired.
Sure.
And then when we do see the process, supposedly the process that's supposed to be working, most of the times these people get off. Even when they're wrong, they get off. There's a check, there's a slap on the wrist, and people are tired. Everybody, I have people there that I know that are there right now. I have a journalist friend that's there right now, and people are just frustrated, tired of talking. I've been to how many meetings? I mean, we've been to several meetings.
Yeah.
We've had several conversations. It's time to stop having conversations and actually see some change, and that's not what we're seeing.
Yeah.
Even with the Citizens Review Board here. We have a Citizens Review Board that doesn't have any power. When they do make decisions, we don't know what happened. We don't know what the recommendations are. We don't know if anybody, if they were followed. We don't know anything, and that is the problem. We are people that's being attacked, and then we're walking around in blind because we don't have no idea if there is change. Sure. And you're talking about all this change. We don't know about it. I don't know about it, and I know the community at large doesn't know about it. So we're sitting here looking like, okay, we're being killed year after year after year, and we've had several shootings here in Charlotte. And my thing is, no one knows if anything changed,
Sure.
if any officers were reprimanded, what happened. So, you can't build trust in the dark. So those are some of the dark spots that we need to shed some light on about what is happening with these officers, what is changing within the police department. And again, I just feel like a lot of these laws and things need to be changed. They're over-policing the black community. Then we get most of the crime is in the black community. Well, most of the people in the black community can't make a living wage. They don't have jobs. So I think we need to put some money into these underserved communities to get people working, have jobs. We have a history of calling in other entities and other foundations to do the work. How about we recruit our own people in the community that know what their community needs to do the work and give them a check so they can feed their families, so they're not out on the street having to resort to other things. Because our whole conversation talked about why some of these crimes happen.
Yep. Absolutely, and I think there's not much daylight between you and Kass. You and I have had some spirited conversations about doing just that.
Yeah. I got two things, CRB, but the second one is this violence reduction initiative is trying to do that very thing. And then COVID hit, right? Having fellows and people who are credible doing good work, doing that work with credibility, and doing it in the areas that is needed. And there's some grant funding behind that. So that's a positive that should be coming eventually if we ever get through this COVID. But CRB is an interesting topic. It's an interesting topic. But here's the deal, Kass, I think it's a matter of sequence, and I know we got to let you go. But if you're talking about the legal standard, which is the standard, it's the law of the land, and changing the legal standard, is going to have to take a case all the way to Supreme Court. Fine. But here's what I say. The reasonable standard, it's a reasonable officer's judgment, all right, about their life being in jeopardy. That's the standard legally. We've been talking about something much higher, a moral and ethical standard that we're talking about, which is a cultural understanding of people different than you.
Yeah.
That's the work that you're talking about needs to be educated. And you tell me what venue and in which manner you want it, because we've been trying to educate people. But it's right now, in times like this when people are emotional, you're not going to learn, you're not going to retain anything in emotion. Right now, what we're trying to do is figure out how to keep this from happening. I think there has to be a dual front. You got to do both. It's both and. And our struggle is, I need people helping me get that information out. We need people helping me get more people who can have officers who are their accountability cloak, for lack of a better term, who they can call directly, because that's how we start really changing the system. Otherwise, the system keeps rolling, and we keep having these conversations. Well, somebody will. My clock is ticking too.
I feel the same way.
Yeah,
Because
we've
I'm being
heard.
honest with you, I'm ready for the work that I
Yeah.
have passion for, that I'm unfiltered, and nobody's going to tell me, hey, Chief, your time is up. That's what I'm ready to do.
Okay.
Well, this time is up, and I wanted to thank the two of you for your time. Greg, you know, pulling
Thank
away,
you.
doing the people's work out there with Heal Charlotte. You've been
Yeah.
nothing but just an advocate for the community, and can't thank you enough for making time. Kass, look, we may not all agree or see eye to eye all the time, but I know I don't want to speak for this man, but he respects the hell
You
out
don't
of you.
need to. She knows I respect her. So.
Sure do, and your insight is no less important than anybody else on this panel or in this community, and it was just awfully gracious of you to come on
you.
today for this important topic. And Chief, obviously something near and dear to you. I know your time is ticking as far as your profession goes, the career goes, but this is going to be an
For
issue
this
that's
career,
going to...
but the work continues,
absolutely.
and I can do it a bit more aggressively.
I want to
and
meet him on the
unfiltered.
other side.
There you go.
Yeah,
You will.
Oh, no, you don't.
That's where I want to
Yeah.
meet him.
No.
I want to meet him on the other side.
That's it.
I
All we
want
have
to see
do
that.
Is keep breathing. It's coming.
Okay.
I appreciate this time right here. Like this is
it's important.
to speak candid, to be able to come out and just say what's on our minds, and then to have you on the platform speaking also your representation of this department. You are the head of this department of CMPD. So I appreciate you being able to do this. I don't know how many people are doing it around the country. So
Right.
you know, whoever is coming after you, I know who is, but you know, just make sure you pass that down. I see you.
Well, I can tell you, let me give you one example of how accountability works. You get that person's name and number.
I got
right
him.
now.
I got him.
That's how it works. You can call that number now.
Yeah.
So for those who can't see behind the scenes, we have incoming police chief, Deputy Chief Johnny Jennings, who will be taking over after the RNC
Good
and
man.
taking copious notes and listening very carefully. You know, community service and community engagement, it's something he's no stranger to. He's been in that business for a long time, and he's literally waiting in the wings. Can't thank everyone enough for joining us. Spirited dialogue. We can't let it stop here. Continue thoughts, prayers for everyone in Minneapolis, across the country, and let's just hope to God that we get this thing figured out.